Okay, we are live now on YouTube instead of Facebook. Thanks everyone for your patience.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mohammed Hashim. I'm the senior organizer for the Toronto York Region Labour Council. And today's program, called Voices from the Frontline, is brought to you in partnership with the Broadband Institute. Today, we're going to be discussing the public sector. And we, of course, recognize the public sector is incredibly vast and complex. There are people working in public housing, even at the CRA right now, who are helping people get CERBs or unemployment, and a ton of other services like fire and whatnot that people are relying on. Their value continues to be immeasurable. However, today we're trying to bring focus to three key areas of the public sector: shelters, transit, and education, because all of them have been at the forefront of public debate. When we looked at long-term care homes in episode 1, we heard of the incredible difficulty of containing the virus in such vulnerable circumstances. I've heard many of the same difficulties from shelter workers, except a really few key differences. In nursing homes, you can control who comes in and who goes out. But in shelters, you can't do that. People will come in and people will go. Sometimes they'll need to do that. So the capacity for there to be control in that environment is significantly less than there is in long-term care. But yet, there they are. They're vulnerable and they need help as well. Today we're going to hear from Camilla Brown, a shelter worker who's also a member of QP Local 79, who works at a public shelter. And she's going to talk about some of the challenges and the fears and the hopes of herself and many of her colleagues. And later on, we'll be joined by Caroline Ambrose, the unit chair of all shelters at QP Local 79. Public transit has been one of the most contentious issues in Toronto for the last decade, if not the most. At a time when everyone is being told to stay home, some of us can do that and some of us can't. So how do we control preventing a breakout in a public transit system, which is being utilized to move all the workers who need to get home to work or anywhere else they need to go? So today we're going to talk to Ed Cunningham, who's a transit worker, who's going to talk about how he and his fellow members of ATU Local 113 did a work refusal and what their circumstance looks like. And later on, we're honored to have Carlos Santos, the president of ATU 113, also bring the context of what is happening in transit. Just before this pandemic, the most discussed issue, though, in Ontario was education. There was a lot of talk about e-learning and what that will look like and what class sizes are going to look like and much more. And all that discussion ended immediately the pandemic broke out. And we were left with a situation where we didn't know what education is going to look like. Some people are calling this online learning. Some people are calling it e-learning. We're calling it crisis learning because this is not any of that. And I heard that term from Kim Fry from the Elementary Teachers of Toronto, calling it crisis learning, because that's what it really is. And today we're going to hear from Mary Marcella, who is an elementary teacher and member of OECTA York Region. And later, one of my favorite people in the whole world, Filomena Ferreira, the president of OECTA York Region. So let's begin with Camilla. All right, let's see if we can get Camilla's camera on. Hi, Camilla, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, I'm good.
So Camilla, tell us about the work right now, because when most of us think of shelters, we think of big gymnasiums with people in cots. But what does your work look like right now?
Well, you know, you're right when you said, you know, we have no control over how clients come and clients go. And we don't. we've tried to keep our regular clients as much as we possibly can, but as you know, in a general sense, clients, they go off somewhere and they don't get back in time to secure their bed, and they lose their bed. So now we have an open bed. And if that particular client doesn't come back and somebody else comes and needs a bed, we're now obligated to give it to that other person if, you know, if they fit the criteria. So you're right, we don't have any control over who comes and who goes.
Who comes and who goes? What do your clients look like or feel like, or what are the circumstances that they're dealing with?
Well, we have our long-term clients, clients who are elderly. They don't have enough money to sustain themselves. They're not, sometimes some of them are not physically capable of sustaining themselves. And Seton House is their home. You know, it's their home. And we have to, you know, recognize that, and they're there for the interim, like they're there until they pass, a lot of them. We have other clients who are dealing with addictions, alcohol, substance, mental health. We have a whole different range of clients that we are dealing with. And we're also, because of the pandemic, dealing with a new generation of clients, where we have clients that are coming in. We had one client come in the other day because he was asked to leave where he lives. He was living in a rooming house. There was, like, I think he said 25 people in this rooming house. And because one of the persons had the COVID, everybody else was kicked out of the dwelling. So of course you're left with somebody who can barely afford to pay rent and just renting a room. And those things are far and few between. So he had nowhere else to go but the shelter.
That's wow.
And he came to the shelter, and we actually couldn't give him a bed because we just didn't have one.
What happened to him?
We had to refer him to central intake and hope that they would be able to help him. But more often than not, a lot of our clients are on the street because we can't help them, or we're not able to help them because there's just not enough beds.
So during the pandemic, things must have changed. Physical distancing is now an issue. PPE is now an issue. How have you and your colleagues been dealing with that?
In terms of the physical distancing, we'd had to send a lot of the clients, almost half the clients in the shelter, to different locations. So we're utilizing community centers, hotels. Just found out we're, utilizing buildings that are being deemed to be demolished. I mean, they're not incapable of being lived in. As you know, the city's putting up condos everywhere, and they want to demolish these particular buildings and use them as condos. But in the interim, we are using them as shelter for clients who we've had to redeploy to other places so that we can adhere to the social distancing.
Yeah.
And
people stay in their own rooms there, or at Seton House, or
they don't have their own rooms.
That's physical distancing of that.
Pardon?
It's impossible to keep physical distancing.
It is impossible to keep physical distancing. One of our rooms had over 25 guys in it. So we had to fix that.
When people are leaving the shelter, because they can't stay there the whole day, right?
Yeah, they can if they want to. They can stay in all the time. We have clients who just never leave.
Huh. Is that common in most shelters?
No, it's not. Some shelters, they have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and they have to leave. In fact, we actually had a program where clients would have a bed for the night, but in the morning they had breakfast and they had to leave.
So where do they go?
They go out into the community. There's there were lots of drop-ins that they could go to during the day, and then in the evenings they'd come back and reassign another bed. We had to close that program because it meant that we had too many clients. We had too many clients coming in and out and not knowing who was coming in the next day. And so we've changed it now so that all of the beds are permanent, and that in turn encourages the clients who are there to stay, so that we don't have that issue of every single day we've got like 20 or 30 different clients coming in.
Now, these are a lot of people that are going through trauma.
Mm-hmm.
How is it on you dealing with, like, have you seen anything that have shaken you, or?
A few things. I experienced one client that he'd been stabbed in the neck by another client, and we basically, we helped the client as best we could, but he almost died right in front of us, and we had to deal with that, and we had the after effects of that. A lot of the staff, including myself, took time off because of that.
Wow.
Having to deal with that traumatic experience.
Did he
Luckily,
survive?
the gentleman didn't die, but he came pretty close. Didn't think he was going to make it.
Wow. But he survived.
He survived, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that was probably one of the only things that was kind of keeping me together. I felt like I was watching a movie. It just didn't seem, I know it was real, but it just, to this day, it doesn't feel real, because I felt like I was watching a movie, but it was real.
Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine having to deal with the trauma of being like when I was in Quebec City after the massacre in the mosque there, and once you see like bloody carpets and bullet holes, I was there the day after, and like the way that sits on you for a long time is difficult. How do you deal with that level of trauma?
I'm not sure that I mean, I feel like I'm dealing with it. And then sometimes I feel like I'm numb and I'm not feeling it. I don't know whether that's just the job, because, we have to deal with these things every single day. And after these things happen, you have to come back to work. I mean, you don't have to, but it's a choice that you make. But, in order for you to fix your mind so that you can come in the next day, it's hard. Some people can't do it. My friend's always telling me, I don't know how you can do that job. I can't do it. I don't know how you can do it.
Wow.
Sometimes I don't know how I can do it, but I just do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I could tell that, like, you deeply care about your clients, and that, I sense that, like, you feel bad for being numb, but I mean,
yeah, I do sometimes.
That's your survival mechanism.
But you just have to.
How has a pandemic amplified it? Or, I mean, you've got lots, I mean, if you're in a state of fear, and like there's, like, it's difficult that working there all the time. What is it, how's this pandemic, has there anything happened since the pandemic started that has also just kind of amplified these feelings?
Yeah, like we, as we were downsizing in the shelters, we had to deal with clients who ordinarily would be able to always come to Scene House, and they'd know that there would be a bed for them. They'd know. or they just assume that even if they waited a couple of hours, eventually they would get a bed. And that was true for the most part, but it's changed completely, in that we went through a period of change where we didn't have as many beds to give out as we normally would, and that number had been almost split almost in half. But it was done sort of in increments. So, you know, one day we'd think that we had, you know, like 23 beds that we could put clients into. And, you know, the clients would be standing there and they'd be waiting to be booked in. And then we'd get word from management, oh, that room's been closed. And we're like, yeah, you can't do that. We've got clients here waiting. What are we going to do? What are we going to tell them? If we don't have a bed, they have nowhere else to go. You can't just come and tell us that we're closing down this room after we've told the clients that after a certain period of time we were able to give them a bed. So now we've got irate clients standing there right in front of us, screaming and yelling at us. All of them in this space that's impossible to socially distance them because the area is too small. And they're all begging and pleading us for a bed to get in, and we can't help them.
Do you feel safe at work yourself?
Not always. It varies. But I experienced something yesterday that made me feel extremely uncomfortable, to the point where I just had to leave the building. And that was the only way that I could ensure my safety. This is sorry?
I don't want to impose on you. If you don't want to discuss it, it's totally fine. But if you want to, you're welcome to.
It was a client who had serious mental health. He had fixated himself on me and in an aggressive manner and proceeded to stalk me all over the building. And let's just say the building is structured in such a way that it was impossible to keep him out of the building. Even though we put him outside, it wasn't hard for him to get back in. All he had to do was jump the fence, which he did, and he did numerous other things. And every time he did that, he found me, and I just thought, you know what, I can't do this. I'm going home. And that's the first time in the 15 years that I've been doing this job that's happened to me.
You know, this pandemic has created a lot of difficulty in a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And I'm, you know, when I hear you, I feel like we're just at the beginning of it, and that, you know, like the symptoms, you know, like the way our nervous system, our collective nervous system looks like, you know, the shelters are the nerve ends of it, where when something like this happens, like a global pandemic, that, you know, the most immediate people that get directly affected are food banks and shelters. And the repercussions of it are going to be long and difficult, because there's lots of people who are going to go through mental health issues and whatnot.
And it's hard for them, because it's like a double whammy for the clients, because if we can't give them a bed, they're not supposed to be out on the street. They're not supposed to be congregating. They get fined because they're congregating, but they have nowhere to go. So where else can they go but the streets? They don't have the luxury of the coffee shops to sit in, which some of them do, or the shopping malls to mull around in during the day. Then they're out on the street, which is the one place that they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And they're just getting double whammied from everywhere. Excuse me.
Well, Kamala, thank you very much for your time today and for all the work that you're doing. I mean, we're, you know, part of this is just to recognize the incredible bravery and courage that our frontline workers like you demonstrate day in and day out. and the care by which you provide, you do your daily work. It's not just a matter of doing a job. This is something that you care about, and people that you care about, and I can feel that from you. There's a couple of questions on the thing. What shelter workers get to deal with since there's a new director from the province? Since there is a new director from the province to support workers, ensure their safety, I want to find out how effective is that on the ground. Have you felt anything from the province saying that you know, these new directors around health and safety are changing or making it more safer for you?
I think that they're trying in their own way. We are having, I know that we've had difficulties with PPEs. We're getting them, that they're very few and scarce, and they keep running out. So we end up certain times during the shift without them. We have issues about, you know, wearing PPEs when we have codes. And a lot of the time our codes predict that we actually don't have time to even put them on so that we can deal with situations. So that's one of the big issues that keep coming up, saying, yeah, the PPEs are in the office with the shift leader, the door's locked. So if somebody's fighting, we've got to wait for the shift leader to come back to open the door, get the PPEs, and then we can get, and it's just not practical. So, you know, we've been told, okay, you get PPE when you come on shift and you carry it with you all the time, but still, in the interim, you have sometimes seconds to defuse a situation, and it does not give you time to put on your PPEs.
Wow. Thank you so much for all that you do. Like, if I know you have to get back to work, so if you know, that's totally appreciated. If you want to stick around, you're welcome to stick around too.
I can stick around for another maybe 15 minutes.
Any last parting words?
I think one of the things that I know just from a personal experience, and I know that people in the public, they don't see us. And I know that because before I started doing this job, I had no idea about the things that we as frontline workers have to go through. I had no idea until I started doing this job. I had no idea that there was more than one shelter even in Toronto, and there's over 30, 40, maybe more than that now. I had no idea the reasoning why people become homeless and all of those kind of things. And just being in this job it just teaches you how to put things in perspective so you don't end up at the place where you work. And it's not that hard to fall into that category. Anything can happen to you that can change your life so that you may end up in one of these facilities. And people just, if you've never been there and you've never experienced that, a lot of people out there just don't know what we do. And I just hope this video will educate them and give them some more insight into what we do. Because I know that they just don't. They just go live their lives. They don't see. I walk down the street and I can tell a homeless person just like that. Before this job, I would walk down the street and I wouldn't even know. Wow.
It's definitely been an eye-opening conversation. Thank you so much. And you know, I wish you all the best of luck back at work. Thank you. I'm gonna bring Ed in now from the ATU 113. Ed, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here.
Wow, that was an intense conversation.
Absolutely.
You know, Ed, let's start with physical distancing for you, because like when I think about the transit system, and I think about, you know, people like, you know, you are the ones who are responsible for moving Toronto. You get people from A to B. That means they come into your workplace Thousands and thousands of people come into your workplace every single day. And it's like your desk is just constantly being, there's a flow of people just walking through your desk. You work in subway stations. What does that look like?
I do such a varied number of tasks. My actual job, they call me a capital service person. So where there's construction, renovations, and stations, I'm sent in to clean up any extra dust mess that accumulates as a result of that. But I'm also used for sort of janitorial schedules, which would be washrooms, garbages, things like that in the stations. I train new janitors who come in, do some peer training with them. I run auto scrubber like flare machines. So generally, I don't know what I'm doing until the start of my shift every day. I don't know where in the city I'll be. So I'm definitely out interacting with the public all day, you know, various parts of subway stations, but always directly involved with the public.
What is, so now with the pandemic, do you feel that you're getting enough PPE, or you're safe at work? Do you feel at risk at all?
We've gotten a little bit more PPE recently, and been given the option to supply our own, basically, which obviously isn't ideal, but it is better than nothing, right? So that's helped me a lot compared to where we were a month ago.
Yeah. Now, so tell me, like, I mean, when you, like, you were involved in a work refusal.
Yes.
What were the circumstances around that?
I got to the point where it was simply my belief that because of the way I work in stations, so I have no physical barricade around me at any time. There's nothing to stop a person from walking right up to me at any moment, which normally I welcome. I mean, I love giving people directions. I love helping people out, and I still do. But in this time where we're supposed to be physically distancing, the fact that that's not possible and often doesn't happen was a big concern to me. So my work refusal, it wasn't necessarily I need this one thing so much as I need a combination of PPE and measures in place to support distancing, something that's going to give me a proper level of safety. So some of the things I asked for, and I realize now this was, okay, probably unrealistic to the point of being inappropriate, but I said N95 masks would make sense for us because it's something we've always had right up until now where there's a shortage, right? Some sort of face shield. And then also just one thing that really bothered me was we had an announcement that was playing in the stations all the time saying customers should stay 6 feet away from customers and from vehicle operators. And my thing was, well, why doesn't that announcement mention all the other employees who work here, right? So, I mean, I know that announcement probably doesn't make a huge difference, but just that messaging should be there, you know?
Yeah. What happened with the work refusal then?
Well, I have to say, I mean, my bosses were very, very respectful of the whole process, very professional with the whole process. It ended up being very long simply because the ministry, I guess, is getting tons and tons and tons of calls right now from many, many work sites. So it ended up spanning pretty much 2 full days before we had an actual answer. And the answer from the ministry ended up being what they're giving pretty much anybody on a COVID work refusal, which is that it doesn't meet the requirements to be a work refusal and will be investigated as a ministry complaint. So obviously that was frustrating to me, but I came in the next day, I spoke with my foreperson, probably not in the exact terms I should have, but had a talk with them, and he actually set up a meeting with me, conference call later in the day, to speak to somebody from TDC Safety, somebody from TDC Hygiene. I had great support from Aleem Tarani, who you know on Labor Council, but he's one of my executive board members, and he was on the phone with me, texting me all day, you know, what's going on, what advice do you need, how can I help you? So he was a wonderful support, as well as our safety rep, Andrew Filatico. They were both with me all the way. So what came of it, basically from the ministry, nothing. But the company has since changed that announcement so that there's one that includes all employees. And we got some disposable face shields as of last week. So me, that's a huge difference. And it gives me a lot more confidence just when I'm dealing with somebody face to face from 2 feet away, you know?
Totally, yeah. No, just like we're really grateful that Aleem Tarani is on the executive board of the Toronto York Region Labour Council, and he's been doing great work with us. And there's no surprise that he was there.
There's the reason I texted him first, you know?
Yeah. I want to talk to you about when you get home. Like, you know, obviously you're in contact with like a lot of different people day in and day out. When you get home, you have young kids, I understand.
I do, yeah, 4 and 8.
Wow. So like, how is it coming home now to knowing that you've been in contact with so many people?
Oh, I mean, the family in general, we have a rule. Everything I'm wearing goes in the wash immediately. Not allowed to touch anything. And I go in the shower. And of course, that means no hugs and stuff when I get in the door, which fortunately my kids are at an age now where they kind of grasp that. I'm really glad this didn't happen a couple of years ago, because I can't imagine my son as a 2-year-old, you know, processing all this and no, daddy can't give you a hug right now. And so I'm glad at least they're at an age where they sort of comprehend it.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little easier. But yeah, everything's got to go in the wash, and, you know.
No, I'm encouraged to hear that. Like, I mean, like sometimes, like when we see big strikes that happen, you know, like strikes are typically the last, like the last refusal in a negotiation. And you know, work refusals are always very serious, because you know the implications of like people feel at risk for being at work, and that's why they refuse to be at work. And you know, no one takes that duty lightly. But I'm glad to hear that it actually changed company policy, and that now, you know, people are being provided the protection that they need. If there was one last thing you would like to tell the transit riders and the supporters of AT 113 out there, what would that be?
Well, to people within my own workplace, I just say that nobody knows your job like you know your job. So stand up for your safety. You can't expect that either the company or even your union is going to know exactly what you need. So make sure that you're vocal, you're communicating. If you need to refuse, you refuse. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. But nobody, because we have such a diverse workforce. Even if you look at our train operators, we have 3 different types of trains. Each train has a completely different cab for the operator, different procedures. So everybody kind of has to look out for their safety in this time. And to people at large, I mean, province is starting to open up. And at the same time, we're looking at TDC service cuts and layoffs as a result of lack of funding. So please, if this is affecting you, communicate that. Communicate with your councillors, your MPs, your MPPs, communicate with the TDC. TDC is going to do their best to allocate what resources they have, but you've got to communicate with them, right? Let them know if a route's having trouble, let them know that route's having trouble, and get on your politicians and ask them for some emergency funding, because it's desperately needed. And I really think it's going to make a big difference in how safely we're able to distance and how much we're able to, you know, safely come out of the isolation without having major reinfection rates.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, if there was, like, if we were to, if Toronto was a body, then like the TTC are the blood veins.
Absolutely.
All of us transport our, like, you know, go from one place to the next. And, you know, if there's an infection in one place or an outbreak in another place, it's hard to imagine that being containable, because there's just so many people going through so many of it. So, I mean, keeping those stations clean, keeping the subways clean, and keeping, you know, all of us safe is what you and your colleagues are doing. I really commend you for doing that. I really appreciate that. So thank you very much. We're gonna move on to Mary now, but thank you so much, Ed. I really appreciate you.
Much appreciated.
So Mary, can we have you join us? And Skylar's gonna, aha. Mary, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Yeah, it's been an interesting conversation so far.
It has been. Actually, I wanted to reiterate your gratitude to your guests, not only today, but including those that have been on past episodes. Because when I listen to their stories, these are people who are out there working in the public sector, and their level, what they're exposing themselves to is a level of risk to their health and well-being that I'm not. And then as I listen more so, I think these guests may very well be parents that are the parents of the students I teach. Like what they're going out and doing, they could be representing what my children are dealing with, what my students are dealing with in their own homes. So I just wanted to say thank you as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like we make our flyer, as you know, is, we try to make it as though you guys are superheroes, because it's important. It's so important what everybody is doing. It's always been so important, but everyone's been doing for so long. But I'm glad that finally society is starting to take notice and appreciate the frontliners and all the people who are working to keep our society going right now. Let's start with March break. So the day or 2 days before the March break, there was an announcement saying schools are shutting down for 2 weeks after. So that threw the entire world that we knew into disarray, because everybody realized that, oh, wow, I'm going to have my kids at home. Oh, wow, what's going to happen with school? Is it actually going to open after 2 weeks? Is it not going to open after 2 weeks? How are we going to deal with this? Are we going to be coming into work? How can I come into work when I got kids at home? So our entire society halted to ground when the minister said school's going to be out. And I thought to myself, okay, educators are now, they're going to be off. There's got to be a plan for them to come back to work. What is that plan going to look like? And, all this conversation about e-learning and whatnot, which we'll get to in a second. But when they said, we're going to reopen schools, were you prepared for that?
When they said we were going to reopen schools,
Yeah.
In terms of the distance learning?
Yeah.
No, I wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared, and I don't think any of us were, but we were willing to make it work. But that uncertainty, that unknowing of how it was going to look and what it was going to mean or what it was going to entail, it was a big challenge. It was definitely, it still remains a challenge. But no, I didn't know.
What kind of direction did they give you? Like, we're starting this thing and now you all have to go out there and teach kids now online.
Well, so for those of us who had an online platform to begin with, we kind of tried to figure it out, but some of us didn't. And we were actually getting information just like the public. So through the media, through the minister announcing that they've now created all these links for students to access. And then we would get information, okay, you can now, reach out to your kids, to your students, and find out who has Wi-Fi, who has technology. Every week there was an add-on to, okay, now you're going to be expected to do this, and now you'll implement the next step. And so it's definitely been a learning curve for a lot of us, but I think we're all trying to make it work. And again, it's not intended to be e-learning, or it really is. I really like how you quoted someone at the beginning. It is crisis learning. It's an emergency. We're in an emergency. We're in a pandemic. So as teachers, we are lifelong learners, and we are trying to learn on how to make this work as effectively as possible.
So what does it look like? Has your day gotten shorter? Has it gotten longer? How is your teaching looking like?
So my day is quite long. So I do have a platform. Do you want me to focus in on just my teaching? So I do offer a daily check-in for my students through the Google Classroom. And through that check-in, I'm able to see that students are signing in as early as 7:30 a.m. to as late as 7:30 p.m. So I try to be as accessible throughout the day. It's not like just your regular school day. And why do I do that? It's because students all have different situations in their home environment. And so I am trying to be as accessible. Do I have Google Meets? I do. Are all students participating? No, unfortunately. But again, I don't know what's happening in students' homes. I have reached out through phone calls. So the day is set up, my day is set up with a daily check-in where they can tell me about how they're feeling. And so, are they happy? Are they silly? Are they sad? Are they nervous? And when I see little red flags, then it gives me an opportunity to reach out to them through a private comment or through a phone call. And I say, I noticed that you indicated you were sad today. What's going on? And then the student has that opportunity to chat with me. Then there's a greeting for all the kids. So I try to greet them. And then there's a task. And I try to make the task as meaningful as possible for them. And then I provide feedback. But the day isn't just me, teaching, it's me planning, it's me preparing, it's me being accessible, providing feedback. It's me attending virtual meetings with colleagues and with staff. And it's me scrolling through Twitter, seeing what the next educator is implementing so I can learn how to do that too and go back at it. So it's a long day. And I used to be that parent who would be upset with my kids that they're always on their screens. Well, now I've become that obsessed kid on her screen all the time, trying to see what is most current.
You really struck me when you said, you check in every day, and if they're sad, you feel that. And it just made me think that, teachers are so much more than just educators, because you build connections that are deep and human with these kids. What grades are you teaching, by the way?
I'm teaching grade 3.
And when you say you're checking in to see if they're sad, it tells me how committed you are, not just to their education, but to their individual success. How do you maintain those connections? Are there ways that you're doing that are unique, that are thoughtful, that you can think of, that other educators may hear or be inspired by?
So this year in particular, I have practiced a lot of mindfulness with my class. We actually participated in the Goals Project. And our goal for this year was bringing awareness to good health and well-being. And it kind of, I'm actually grateful that we embarked upon that task early on, because through this pandemic, we continue to practice our mindfulness. And I actually invited a guest, a yoga instructor, to practice mindful breathing during one of our sessions. Again, though, was every child available? No. Were those who were there benefited? Absolutely. Did I provide strategies on the website for them to access at a later time? I have. So I'm hoping that mindfulness helps them regulate through this uncertain time. So yes, I absolutely am concerned about, I'm so used to hearing little crazy stories every day, and now they're not in front of me.
And you have your own kids too.
I do. I have 3 children, one in grade 2, one in grade 8, and one in grade 10. So elementary and secondary panel. Wow.
Secondary panel. You sound like a teacher. It's incredible, because so I'm hearing a lot about access to technology being a deterrent for kids. Typically when we talk about e-learning, we know that parents that have the ability to sit with their kids and go through those lessons and to talk to them, to teach them through, are the ones that are most successful, have the highest likelihood of success. But in this pandemic, people are I know people who have 2 kids at home and were trying to keep their jobs and try to do a good job, but they also got to put lunch on the table and look after homes and families. Who do you think is falling through the cracks right now?
So I'm this distance learning situation, I think a lot of us are falling through the cracks. Yes, it works for those children who have someone at home that can support the learning experience. But is it to replicate the classroom? Absolutely not. It just can't. When I say I made phone calls, I discovered that, I have some students whose parents are both working out of the home, and they don't want their child on any device while they're not home to supervise. And when they get home after a full day of work, they're tired and they just want to be able to enjoy a meal and take comfort in each other's company. I have other parents who, have multiple children in the home at a very young age. And so dad is out or mom is out and one parent is home trying to entertain the young children. Then, like myself, I rely on my older children to care for my younger child at times, right? Because I need to get work done. So it's not an ideal situation. Sometimes I think about it as this distance learning is like one really long indoor recess routine. So I don't know if your child, when it's like wintertime or raining or it's icy out, they have indoor recess weather or indoor recess routine because it's inclement weather. And if you're a guest or a visitor to the school that day, you can tell that we've been inside for a long period of time because we're all on edge, students and teachers. And so, we are trying to make it work. Checking in, phone calls, meets, delivery, we're trying to make it work. Is it going to replicate or replace the classroom? Absolutely not, because the way teachers teach it is so much more powerful when there's that social and human connection with kids, right? Like there's that whole gradual release, which we can't implement online. There's students who have that peer interaction that can exchange thoughts. That's missing. Teacher noticing that somebody is struggling. Well, for that child who doesn't have a parent or an older sibling next to them to say, I notice you're not getting it. Let me call you up and sit with you. Well, then they're at a disadvantage. That small group setting to go over a concept, that hands-on learning, it's just not there. And so again, like this is just, it's a temporary measure, I'm hoping. And it is crisis learning, it's distance learning. We're trying to make it work. Is it successful for everybody? No. And it's because there's so many other variables at play in students' homes.
I got two last questions for you, but the first one is, what are some of the risks of online learning? I've heard some people give a number of examples that have been like problematic. What are some of the biggest risks that you see?
So some of the meets that I've had, so for example, for me, for starters, I need to ensure that if I'm alive, as I am now, there's nothing behind me, you know nothing about my personal dwelling. And nor do I want to know about your personal dwelling, really. But I can't control that. So I was extremely hesitant about going live with my students. And before I did that, I had to ensure that I had set parameters, set guidelines with the parents that they had to discuss with their child before I pursued it. And one of those things was, your child shouldn't be in their bedroom, and it should be in a convenient space for everyone to be able to see. And I didn't want recording, and I didn't want photographs taken. But what I have experienced is, siblings are coming in and throwing pillows at their sibling who's on a meet. And also there's also, it hasn't occurred with me, but I have heard from other colleagues that, racial slurs have occurred in that environment, and I can't control that. And, or, there's a parent screaming in the background, or maybe someone will come walking by in their underwear. You can't control that. So that level of control in an online space is scary for us.
Wow. The last question I want to is I can really feel like the love and care that you have for teaching. It's like a calling to you. How do you maintain hope amongst your kids in this difficult time? Because lots of them, I'm sure, are dealing with a lot of stress or anxiety.
The students have provided a lot of positive feedback. And even my own children, when I talk to them and I say, how's this going? And they don't like it, but they're making it work. And kids, and it's not even so much about the work that's being posted, but it's the fact that we continue to connect with them. And that's all they want to know. They want to know that they exist, that their feelings are validated, and that we are all in this together. It's not an ideal situation, but it's worldwide. We're in a pandemic. And as long as we're there for one another, supporting each other, that's what gives me hope, right? Like our whole Education Week theme was igniting hope. And so I have to believe in that hope.
Thank you very much, Mary. I really appreciate it. It's incredible to see. And I mean, we always know it and hear it, but hearing it from you is it's so meaningful, because we put our future generation in your hands, and knowing that somebody on the other side, when we drop them off to school, is going to be there to care and to look after our kids is so important, so vital. So I just want to thank you for everything you've done and continue to do, and I really appreciate you. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, next we have Caroline Ambrose, Carlos Santos, and Filomena Ferrero. Okay, are you all here now? I think we're still on Spotlight for Mary, so we're gonna have to take that off. And then, okay, great. That was a heavy conversation, folks.
Yes.
I want to get some initial reactions from you all. So let's start with Caroline, then to Carlos, and to Filomena.
Well, everything that Camilla said was so true about the shelter system. I'm actually based out of shelters, so like I was, it's almost like I was having my own experiences as she was talking, and it's like, yep, that happens. Yep, that's true. So yeah, it was just, yeah, it brought me back to being on the front line there, and all the things that we face, and all my colleagues are going through right now. And from what Mary was saying, what I really appreciate the work that she's doing, and I can see how hard it is on the kids. I do have 2 at home, and I'm working from home, so I feel it that when they're trying to ask me a question to help, I can't, because I'm in a conference call, or I can't, I'm working right now. And then by the time 5 o'clock comes around, I'm like, I gotta cook. Can we do this tomorrow? So that's so I really feel it, and it's true that the kids who's falling through the cracks and really need the help, and the parents can't help them for whatever reasons. And Ed, thank you so much for saying it. It's something that I've always told my colleagues is about speak up, because sometimes your union does not know what you're doing, what your job is, and we need to know. So thank you for saying that. And I hope, others take that back and say, hey, our union needs to know what's happening in our job. So, changes can be made for the better, for our safety.
Thank you. Carlos.
Yeah. First, I want to thank Mary for the job that she's been doing, because I have an 8-year-old at home, and they're quite the characters. They're constantly on the go, and you just can't keep up. But I just want to touch on a few points that Ed has said. And I do feel for Ed, because a lot of people see the TTC, they see an operator, they see a bus driver, a streetcar driver, Wheel-Trans, or a subway operator. What they don't see is the maintenance side of it. And we have a whole city in itself. We have cleaners, track and structure, which is like, they inspect the subway tracks, the streetcar tracks. We have mechanics, body repair people, painters, plumbers, asbestos removal, bricklayers, material and procurement, carpenters. So we have so many different people, not just transit operators, and I feel the sentiment that Ed is saying, because it seems like that the company was just promoting the transit operators. We're a city in itself, and without the maintenance, we're like a well-oiled machine, and without maintenance, we don't have that machine going, right? And they're an important piece of the puzzle, and I'm glad that the TTC did change their announcements to physical distancing for everyone, not just the operator.
Filomena, kick it over to you. What are your first initial reactions to? All 3 of them were just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And and to hear from them meant a lot. So what do you think?
Well, I first of all want to thank Labor Council and the Broadband Institute for having Mary and I on this episode. I think this whole idea of this is wonderful, hearing from one another. Not only does it build awareness, it does build solidarity amongst us as well. And I really appreciate that. And the frontline workers spoke very eloquently and spoke from the heart. And that's what we can do at this moment, because it is a very emotional time for everybody when we're dealing with a pandemic and we're dealing with work-life balance and all the different situations and challenges that have been brought forward. And for teachers, we're to having a certain way of or a certain expectation of teaching, and that has gone on away for us, and we had to dive into with very little training and very little time to distance emergency crisis learning. It's not e-learning, as was mentioned by Mary. It's very different. The goal is to keep our kids engaged and to keep some normalcy in their lives right now, because they're trying to understand what's going on in the world. And it's very hard for a child to understand why they can't go out to the park, why they can't be with their friends, why they can't see their teacher every day and share lunch with their best friends on a daily basis. Like, this is a very confusing time for them. And teachers, as well as other frontline workers, have to deal with the challenges of work and the challenges of home life and what that brings about. And of course, mental health issues are very important for us as a local union. We want to ensure that our workers, our teachers, have the tools for mental health resources should they want to tap into it for themselves, for their children, for their partners, as well as we want to ensure that our students are also reaching out to the right agencies if they're having coping issues right now because their lives have been turned upside down. But what I can say to teachers, and I'm speaking to all teachers, is that we need to just do our best in this difficult time. We are always our own worst critics sometimes when we feel we can't do what we want to do, but we just have to take it one day at a time, do our best. And I know that everyone is doing their best because this isn't business as usual, not by a long shot.
Totally. I'm gonna go to Carlos first. Carlos,
Sure.
when I was reading what was happening in New York, and I saw that there were over 100 members of the ATU local over there, or New York Transit operators, and that were infected and died from COVID-19. Over 100 people were infected and died in their workplaces. When you see that news, what does that, how do you process that?
Well, there's also over 1,000 members across the U.S. that have actual COVID-19 as well. So that's why it's really scary for our members. And I don't find it unreasonable to be asking for PPE. And I remember the very first time I asked for it, I was called irresponsible by certain politicians just for asking for PPE. So because I'm asking for PPE for our members, I'm irresponsible. I think that's just ridiculous. And as Ed has mentioned before, if we don't know what the issues are, we cannot fix them. So I encourage all the members out there, or all unionized members, just let your union know, because if your union doesn't know, they can't help you with the problems. And we've had several issues down at Queensway, as well as other locations as well, with work refusals.
And those were all around safety?
Yes. So the Wednesday night, I ended up going there. It was 34 operators out of Queensway. I believe there was 5 out of Wilson. I ended up at Queensway. They wanted a mask to operate the vehicle, and the company refused to give them a mask. They had a work refusal. Once again, the Ministry of Labor ruled likely not to endanger. It turned into a complaint. That's on the Wednesday. Once they ruled likely not to endanger, the operators that still had to finish their shift had to get on that bus and go out there, because that's the process we have to follow. The following Saturday, a few days later, we had mechanics, coach techs at the same garage do a work refusal. And I was there. I know I was there for 14 hours. Aleem showed up. It was myself and Aleem that were there for 14 hours. And once again, the Ministry of Labor ruled it likely not to endanger. A complaint was filed. I then got a letter saying, "Dear union leader," they couldn't even address me by name. I guess they didn't know my name, who knows, saying that, asking me to self-isolate and that I've been around, I may have potentially been exposed. I then started showing symptoms. I then ended up self-isolating. I went to get tested. I ended up being negative, but the very fact that the two managers that were there in the same room with us were not sent the same letter to self-isolate, and they're at a different location the very next day was incomprehensible. And not just that, the nighttime shift got sent to various garage locations that very same night, which if we did have an outbreak, you could now be potentially exposing all these different garages. And it has been put in writing to Toronto Public Health, and we have sent the letter to TTC. So everyone knows that this has happened. Out of those complaints, the operators are now getting masks. TTC is now being ordered to give them masks, and the operators are now being given face shields. Mind you, if these work refusals were not done, that wouldn't have happened. Yeah. So as much as we want to try and work with the company, unfortunately, the company doesn't want to work with us, and we're forced. And I don't mean the union. I mean our own people, our members are forced to do some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. How many people have been infected from your local?
Total 41. So there's 34 from our local, the rest is staff and other.
How are you supporting them?
I've actually called every single one of them and asked them if they were okay, if they needed anything. I know there's 2 I couldn't get a hold of because I'm worried, especially if they live by themselves or they're with a spouse and their spouse has it. How are they supposed to get groceries? So that was my main concern, right? You're told not to leave the house. So if you have no family and no friends in the neighborhood and you have no food at home, you can't go buy groceries if you have COVID-19. So that was my main concern with them. I've spoken to all of them, again, like I said, except for 2. Luckily, a lot of them have had family members that have helped them or neighbors that have been able to do grocery shopping for them. There's just been 2 that one had a pneumonia, another one was in ICU, but they've since recovered.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm gonna come over to Caroline for a second. Caroline, we are hearing hundreds of people being redeployed to shelters from across the city of Toronto.
Yes, these were the people that were off work, again, because they were deemed non-essential workers at the time. So, they're filling in jobs that wherever we need help. There's cleaners and frontline workers as a client service workers, which we call CSWs. So yeah, that's the areas that they're being gone to, as well as long-term care, but that was, they're within
the shelter system. If so many people, why are so many people having to be deployed to the shelter system? Like, is there a big work shortage there, or like, is there a big shortage of people there? What's happening?
Yeah. Yes, well, a lot of people are off because, their health is already compromised from other issues, and as well with, with what the statement that came out, if you have certain underlying health issues, you're probably more susceptible to get the virus. So, I have a lot of people that are off, and then there's a lot of people that have to stay home with their family, whether they're elderly or just the children because they're not in school. So we needed an abundance of staff to help fill those gaps. So,
I mean, like then now you have people who have experiences in different places now coming into the shelter system. And like speaking to Camilla, it's like, if you don't know how a shelter is gonna work, or where people are gonna jump the fence, or where a fight could break out, or where to get the PPE from, and it's hard for you to know the environment. All of a sudden, there's a rush of all these brand new people. What effect is that having?
Well, it's very big, and that is a conversation that we've been having back and forth. And again, from my background being from the shelter system itself, it's something that I continue to bring to the table, is the training and, you know, just being prepared. Like, again, like Camilla was saying, being in her shelter is, there's nothing to prepare you for that life at the same time. So you can walk in there and it's like, if you're not used to that, you're automatically afraid. As she said, people ask, oh my God, how do you do your job? I can never do that. We've had police officers say, I can never do your job. I'm like, what do you mean, you know? So, you know, so for me going in there, and then you get the complaints that people are afraid to go to walk the hallways to check on clients, and that's part of the job. So if, you know, the redeployed staff are already hesitant in their job to even go to the shelters, because I do get phone calls from other unit officers saying, you know, this member is going over to the shelters and, you know, what can I tell them to kind of ease the transition? There is no ease in the transition. It's either you're made for this job or you're not. So people coming from Parks and Rec or TESS or, you know, other units, it's the training, it's online. And I think Mary's the one who was talking about it. Online training is not the same, you know, it's not the same as a classroom setting. So that's what they're getting. And our regular members or shelter members are feeling burnt out. They're afraid of going to work because they don't, the person beside them who's redeployed staff doesn't really know what they're doing. So if there's a fight, like Kamala was saying, is something happens, that person's gonna be like a deer in headlights. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when she said that, like, I have to break up fights. I was just like, what are you doing breaking up fights, you know?
Yeah. And like she was saying, being stopped, you know, I actually messaged her and I said, you know, reach out if anything, because the type of support to know somebody else, like that's happened to me. And it was like on a regular, you get threatened, you know, of things that, and some of these clients are very descriptive of what they're going to do to you. So just having someone follow you around without saying anything, it's just as scary as somebody actually telling you what they're going to do to you, you know? So these are things that we face, that we, you know, out of the blue, especially with mental health as well, or someone who has a known criminal background or known violence. Yeah, this is stuff that it's like right there in your face.
Wow. I see a comment from Lily Chang, who's an executive board member of the Labor Council and also unit chair QP Local 79. And she's like, also need more staff for additional temporary shelters open up to allow for physical distancing. What are the temporary shelters looking like now?
Well, they're, again, I call them pop-up shops because that's exactly what it is. And then, you know, they're trying to figure out what to do. So it could be a gymnasium from one of the community centers, a building that they were looking at. Yeah, so those are the type of shelters or temporary shelters that they've been opening up, and they're taking and forgive me for saying it this way, but a regular staff, so a long-term shelter worker, and then they'll make them the site lead and then have the redeployed staff come and work under them. But again, it's difficult when you know what to do, your instincts are ready to react. Meanwhile, you have 2 or 3 people that like, okay, yeah. Oh, okay, I should, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going home. Send me somewhere else, you know, so.
Yeah, I'm sure you're absolutely right. I can't imagine being redeployed to a shelter myself. I mean, like, what would that even look like? Philomena, I'm gonna come to you. All this conversation on e-learning in advance to all this, you know, what do you think people are going to learn from this experience about e-learning?
That is an interesting question. And in fact, just this morning, I had a conversation with someone who was really gung-ho about e-learning, thought that was the way to the future, and now is experiencing this distance learning and is singing a different tune. I think people now are realizing what teachers and education workers and union leaders have been saying. E-learning is not for everyone, and distance learning is definitely not for everyone, because it's a crisis type of teaching, as you mentioned. I think we're slowly realizing that this is not the way education was meant to go. And this is not what we want to see, where we want to see education go. It's not as hyped up as everybody thought it was going to be. And in fact, I think this experience is now turned people off. And we've realized the importance of having a teacher in front of a student. And the importance of being in a classroom and that social connection, all those other hidden curriculum things that are in a classroom outside of the learning of a specific subject. We're all missing that when we're doing it on a computer. So I think now we're living it, and I think people are now seeing what we have been saying for a long time.
You know, like when I like listening to Mary, like, you know, you can totally feel how much she cares about her kids, her students, and you know, it's really encouraging to hear that. What are some of the like the good and the difficult stories that you're hearing from your membership, from teachers?
So I'll start with the difficult and like to end with a little positive stuff at the end. So the difficult stuff is kind of being thrown into this. Not all teachers teach on a virtual platform. So we had to automatically go into crisis mode and start these online module training for teachers. That was provided not only by the employer but also by the union to get us ready for this. So not everyone is at that level. So that caused a lot of anxiety for a lot of teachers because they had to, you know, on the fly kind of do this. And they were coming from March break. So we don't have our resources at home, right? We only have access to limited resources from home. We weren't allowed to go back to the schools to get our stuff. We were given that opportunity once, but that was a little later. It was after distance learning started. So we're kind of putting together things, and I have to say that the stuff that teachers are putting together across the province is amazing, considering what they've had to work with. And I think that's a testament to them and their dedication and commitment, like we're hearing from Mary, because they want to make this work because we care about our students. We care that we want to keep them engaged, and we want to keep something happening in their lives that's a bit normal, because it's kind of nuts out there. So those are all good things that are coming from it, but we came from a real level of anxiety and stress, and a lot of that hasn't gone away because we still don't know what's happening in June. We don't know what's happening in September. Summer school is now looking different already. Students are missing out on a big chunk of curriculum learning. So what does that mean? Are we changing the curriculum expectations for next year? Because the learning is not happening to the same degree that it would happen in a classroom. So these are all the unknown areas that are also causing some stress. But some of the good things that are happening too is that, you know, for example, Mary was part of this too. We as a union provided online resources for, let's say, Earth Week. We did that. We provided resources for our members and helped them. Our members are having food drives at their school level and collecting food for those that are struggling at home right now, putting food on the table. We are sharing stories online. We are sharing videos online. So we are kind of, you know, putting a little bit of hope out there, or I would say a lot of hope out there, a lot of our teachers, and trying to make the best of a very bad situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can definitely see that, like the care is being put towards trying to make the best of the worst situation. I'm going to open it up to questions now because we have a few minutes left. We started a bit late, so I'm hoping I can extend your time a little bit longer. So there's a question that says, just wondering what proportion of people using shelters are seniors, and has this risen during the pandemic, and the proportion of families in there? Are there single men and women who are younger? So what are the general demographics looking like for people in shelters? Do we have a sense? Caroline?
Well, it's mixed because each shelter is have its own criteria. Some are mixed shelters, so it could be have couples and but I know for the one that Camilla is speaking about, it's all men, and it's a age range from 18 plus. Okay.
Where do women go?
Well, we try not to get 18-year-olds. We try not to go less than 21, but if the need is there, it is what it is. That's who we serve, right? There are shelters dedicated only to seniors, to women, only to women with children and families. So
Separate shelters.
yeah, separate shelters. So I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say all of the ones that I know of, but they're, I just want to say there are shelters that are geared just for, a particular population. And then again, some are mixed, men and women. They have ones that are only will allow pets, some don't allow pets. So to say that what exactly a percentage is, it's kind of difficult because again, they're transient, especially for Seton House. They come and they go, they come and they go. So if they're gone, they might be gone for a couple of months, maybe because they found housing, but they can have only afforded it for, the 3-4 months, and now they're back, or many of their addictions took, and they got evicted or something, so.
Wow, there's I think this is probably the best question to kind of end it off on, and which is from the YouTube stream. It says, what issues should we raise with city councilors? So let's start with Carlos, and then we'll go to Caroline, and then to Philomena. Obviously, you have a minister to deal with instead of a councilor. So maybe we'll kind of talk about what are the biggest issues that we need to be addressing politically as a movement, and I'll kick it over to Carlos first.
Sure. Well, once again, transit is, especially in Toronto, we're the least funded transit agency in North America. And what this pandemic has taught us is that we should not be relying on the fare box. There should be a certain percentage from each level of government. It's not my decision as to determine what percentage it should be, but there should be all 3 levels of government that are putting money into transit, so we don't have to worry about the fare box at all. Because at the end of the day, transit should be a right for every citizen in Canada. Also, what I've heard today, it seems like everybody wants to get back to normal, and everyone wants their life back. And I'm encouraging everyone to wear a face mask if they're going to ride transit. I think it's a very big important thing to get our life back to normal. And I'm asking the city of Toronto, I'm asking the TTC, I'm asking the provincial government, the federal government, to encourage everyone to wear face masks in public, because the lower we can, or the faster we can curb the spread, the faster we can get back to normal, our everyday living, going to a restaurant, going to a patio bar, going to a movie, just going to a hockey game. I think everybody has experienced, it's nice to work from home once in a while, but not every day. And that's just what I've been gathering from other people as well. So I think the funding, everyone knows that the TTC wants to lay off 1,200 people, and this is particularly due to funding. We also are having service cuts, which were effective May 10th. I'm still getting photos of packed buses. So what we should be doing again is just pressure all levels of government to change the way that they fund transit, so we're not relying on the fare box. Okay.
Thank you, Carlos.
Okay.
Caroline, shelters are there's a lot of conversation around shelters, but even just as a Cupola 79 rep, what do you think are the major issues? It's kind of funny because the counselor in charge of recovery for social services is Anna Bailao, who was a great friend to the Labor Council. And while Camilla was speaking, she was calling me on my phone, and I was like, should I take it? Should I not? But I'm going to call her back now. What should that conversation look like?
Public operated shelters. I mean, I think people don't see us. We're almost like, we're like the clients we serve. We're hidden, that hidden community. So we need to be seen. More affordable housing and social housing for our clients. They're always talking about housing or house your guys. And I remember our manager had asked us to house 500 men for the year. We're like, where? you know? So I mean, you can reach those numbers so long as the housing is there for them. Yeah, basically, pretty much that's it. I mean, we are not, we are very big, and to come to the shelters last, I think the reaction from the government was kind of slow to see the shelter workers as frontline workers maybe, or just even see us at all, and to know that we had a need. And we were asking for PPEs from the get-go. So I think just being seen as from the get-go, we are taking a care of a part of the city, and we need funding, we need the help, we need the recognition. And when I say, I don't mean like, to be lit up in stars, I mean the recognition to know that there's an issue in the shelters with our clients, and how to be supported.
Well, we'll surely send this episode to a number of counselors for them to kind of hear their perspectives, especially yours and of Camilla's and Carlos's and Ed's, so that they understand what city workers are going through. So we'll definitely do that as well. Philomena, what do you think? Like, how do we move forward from this moment on to make sure that education goes in the right direction?
Well, I would appeal obviously to the provincial government and our board of trustees, that sort of level of government. I mean, I have three main areas that I think should be addressed on the political level. And one is internet companies, communication companies. We should be lobbying them or asking them to provide cheaper rates for our families and for workers who are working from home. There are huge equity issues when it comes to computer equipment and internet and long distance charges, not only for the workers, for students and for families who are trying to make ends meet. We need some more lobbying on that level for
the internet. Yeah, I mean, people could pay $100 a month just for internet access.
Right. I know Minister Lecce at one point said he had some deal with Rogers, and that didn't even pan out. That wasn't really true. So that really needs to continue. That kind of effort from the governments need to continue, and we want to voice that and lobby for that. Also, what needs to be acknowledged and followed is the teacher's professional judgment for in determining how they want to teach online. So the push for teachers to teach online in real time or in live time, if they're not comfortable doing that or they don't want to do that, governments and trustees shouldn't be pushing teachers to do that. Teachers can deliver their lessons any way they want because they're given that professional judgment through ministry documents. So there's so many ways to deliver a lesson, and we do that in the classrooms. That right should be afforded online as well. So we want that to continue, and we want to have that voice strongly heard, because the minister is now saying something a little different, and we're hoping that our boards don't adhere to that. The next thing is, well, what happens when schools reopen? What is that going to look like?
Yeah.
It may happen next month, may not, may happen in September, may not happen in September. So how are we going to adhere to social distancing if schools reopen? What does that look like? Will all workers in a school building be receiving PPEs? How safe will a school be? What are the expectations? So these are the conversations, and the three areas I think are really big areas we need to speak to our politicians about.
Yeah, I mean, like Quebec is opening elementary school soon, right?
Right, outside of Montreal, that's correct.
Yeah, so I mean, like that to me, it just seemed incredibly irresponsible. I didn't like. I was thinking like, okay, if they do that, like, are they going to be facing thousands of teachers just saying, sorry, we're not going to teach? Like that could be a possibility. I don't know if that's what would happen. But yeah, that definitely needs to be thought through more carefully. And I was just gonna I found it really annoying when the minister started talking about synchronous learning.
Yes.
And your point around, the professional judgment of teachers to be respected is a really valid one, because, I think lots of parents are frustrated because, in order for them to work and to have their daily routine, they expect their kids to go to school. But now they're at home and, they're dealing with the challenges themselves of how to, balance home life, work life, teaching kids, being next to kids, all those different things. And I think that frustration is boiling over there, where parents are feeling that level of anxiety. But to impose the responsibility of solving that anxiety, making that fall upon teachers is quite irresponsible. And I was wondering if you have any reaction to that.
Well, that's exactly what we keep communicating to the ministry, is that, there's many ways to deliver a lesson. And ultimately, when a teacher teaches live, they're doing so knowing that to some degree, you are inviting people into your home. That's what's happening. And that's what Mary said. She's choosing to do some of her lessons live, but she also is taking precautions, right? She makes sure that there's no pictures around, there's a blank screen behind her. She's behind a closed door. Her family knows she's teaching right now. Don't bother mommy, that kind of stuff. So, and then you have to set ground rules with the students. You need to be in an office. You need to be in proper attire. You need to take this seriously. Your parents are going to know that I'm teaching live. And you get all those authorizations and knowledge requests so that they know what's going on. So there's a lot of facets to it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of layers. And we always say that when you deliver a lesson, you try to use a variety of techniques to deliver a lesson. Well, I'm not understanding why that just got thrown out of the window right now because we're online, and now we're saying no. You got to do it all live. No, well, there's lots of ways to teach on a virtual platform. You can do Google Slides. You can pre-record. You can email assignments, post assignments. There are so many ways. And to remove that professional judgment from educators during this most stressful time that we're all going through is really highly insensitive from the government, highly.
Yeah, I think that, what became clear from all the conversations today is that, people really need to respect the voices of people who are at the front lines, who know, when to break up fights and when not to teach classes the way they need to, and to make sure that the arteries that are channeling all of us through the city in our transit system are maintained to a level of safety that everybody can be comfortable at. And the people that know this the most are the people who are at the front lines of it. And we really, I think politicians want to get out there and say, we are trying to come up with solutions one way or the other. But, the real solutions need to be building trust with the people who are in the front lines, to give them the right to be able to say, this is what we need to get the job done. And this is how we're going to get it done. And not just for there to be big announcements or whatnot. So I thank you all. I have to wrap it up really quickly because Skylar's telling me to. But thank you all so much for joining us today. And please share this. It's going to be online relatively soon. So please share this with your membership and for your colleagues. And thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.